Almost everyone has a scary story to tell. For truck drivers, many of these stories relate to their time spent on the road. From haunted truck stops to spooky highways, there are many places that can make even the most experienced truck drivers nervous. The story you will read below was told on Reddit by a truck driver who, after his experience, seriously thought about leaving his job. I have no idea where exactly to start with this story, but I have to tell someone. This happened 5 days ago, last Friday. I didn't tell anyone. Not my girlfriend, family, friends, colleagues, boss, anyone. That's why I haul feed for farmers in central Illinois. I've been doing this job for about 3 months and haven't had any problems until Friday. I like to start my day early, so I usually wake up around 11 p.m., already in the truck, and out to get my first load by 3 a.m. I usually unload my first load around 5:30 or 6 a.m. when it is currently still pitch dark outside due to the winter. To be honest, I'm not usually one to get pissed off easily, but some isolated farms scare me a little. So I usually just do what I need to do outside the truck as fast as I can and pass the time waiting for it to finish unloading while sitting in the truck. Some farms are okay, not too far from main roads or quite well lit, but there are a couple of farms that are in fairly dense woodland, one of which only has 2 crap lights which aren't much help, and currently one of them. The lights are off and need repairs. These pig farms aren't always the most well-maintained, if you want to call them that. There will be piles of pig carcasses and trash cans just laying out in plain sight. Anyway, I knew the farm I was going to as soon as I saw my delivery slip and knew I would end up on the dark side of the farm, so I didn't wait for it. I just did my normal routine, loaded up, and connected my phone to the headset and started listening to YouTube while driving. As soon as I started getting closer to the farm, I did what I always do. I take off my headset, hang it up and start double-checking my ID as I slowly meander down the rocky road to the dirt road. Will take me to the farm. I usually drop it down to 6th gear and let it roll slowly as the road is usually pretty shitty. So I'm looking down the road and looking at my delivery ticket again when I smell a terrible smell. Nowadays, farms usually smell pretty bad, so I didn't think much of it at the time, but I do remember this smell being different. It didn't smell like animal shit. It smelled rotten, like something rotten. Now that I look back, the only other time I remember feeling anything even close to this unpleasant was when my family came back from vacation and our freezer stopped working, and as soon as my mom opened it, a terrible, unpleasant smell filled the house. It was a different scent, but that's the closest comparison I can make. Every morning I open the window because the heat in the truck can get quite stifling, so after the foul smell fills the cab, I put down the paperwork and start to open the driver's side window, and as I do that, I notice a woman standing about 50 feet from me off the road to the left, in a field. Now she has completely taken me by surprise, so I panic and my heart starts pounding. I slam on the brakes and turn off the truck because I'm not pressing the clutch. I start laughing at myself a little for freaking out so much, and start rolling down the window to ask if this woman is okay and see if she needs anything. While I do this, she just stands there, almost as if confused. Now that I was focused on her, I began to notice some very disturbing things about this woman. First, she is completely naked at night in the middle of winter. At night, the temperature drops below 0, so walking in this state means hypothermia, frostbite, and possibly death. The second thing I notice is that she is covered in what appears to be blood, but most of it is on her arms up to her elbows, as well as all over her mouth and neck. At this point, I get scared again and my left hand reaches out to find the key to start the truck. Then I yell out the window, "Are you okay?" or something like that, to which she responds by getting on all fours in this weird position with her ass in the air, head down, and running towards me about 10 or 15 feet maybe. I start the truck, put it in gear, and start to slowly pull away towards her since that's all I can do to get away. While I'm doing this, my window is still wide open and I hear her doing something like sounds. They weren't words. They didn't sound like words. It was just screaming and grunting. I'm starting to switch gears as fast as I can, and after about 5 seconds I put it in 6th gear, and she has made it to this point right up to the ditch, but not in it, and she stops and does not cross the ditch. I continue. Put it in gear and leave as fast as I can, my heart pounding the whole time. When I leave, I can't see her anymore as soon as she comes out of the light of my truck because it's pitch black everywhere and I'm in the middle of the country and there's no light. Part of me tries to rationalize what just happened and thinks maybe she was a victim of something and that I should come back, but she acted completely crazy and convinced me not to come back immediately. So at this point, I was actually very close to the farm. So close that I drove down the driveway running away from this woman. So I walked down the road and back onto the highway and basically do really big circles around the farm I have to deliver to for about 45 minutes until it's light outside and I can see clearly. I then head to the farm, this time looking for the woman or any sign of her, but there is nothing. I stopped right where the interaction happened and walked towards where she was, but there was no sign that anyone or anything was there. The first thing I noticed was that there was no more smell. Looking back, I expected to see at least a little blood, but no. Then I returned to the truck and noticed that the entire time I walked through the field, I left tracks. I turn around and check the ground again, but there is nothing, no footprints or anything. Now I'm a big guy, but not huge, 6'5" and 230 kg, so maybe she was significantly lighter and that explains the lack of fingerprints. But to me, she didn't look that skinny. I think she was to leave traces. Anyway, I look around everywhere I saw her move and she disappeared without a trace. I go to the farm and deliver the feed without any problems, continue my day as usual and go home. I don't know what I should have done. I don't know what I saw. Part of me thinks I abandoned the victim when I could have helped. Part of me wonders if it was some kind of hallucination or something. But I'm young. I'm 24. I have no health problems. And I don't drink, smoke, or take any substances, pills, medications, or anything else that could cause this. The only thing I have is a history of frequent sleep paralysis. But that's it. And I had absolutely no sleep. I don't know what I saw or what it was, but after that I abruptly quit my job and am now looking for something else. The only thing I can say for sure is that I never want to drive at night again. My dad drove trucks when I was about 5 and my brother was 3. He did it purely to earn money to take care of us, which also meant he needed to be able to go home to his family at the end of the day. Children. He was driving up the side of a mountain that looked like one taken straight out of a Bugs Bunny cartoon. Everything goes in a spiral, with these rickety metal barriers that, if smart cars were invented, wouldn't stop, even them from jumping over this thing, let alone a semi-trailer. My dad was very tired but wanted to push to get home faster. He was walking up the mountain when he heard on the radio what he swore was the Flying Frenchman. This was followed by a whole bunch of boos. My dad apparently wasn't bothered by this exclamation for long, because just a few seconds later 2 full-size, seemingly fully loaded semi-trailers came rolling down the mountain on both sides of the road. My father had to make a quick decision: cliff or stone face. There was almost no shoulder, but it was almost certainly going to crash into the side of the mountain, so he did his best to avoid them as best he could and drove towards the shore. My dad said he turned the steering wheel as quickly but carefully as he could towards the extremely narrow embankment on his side, did everything he could to avoid skidding, and narrowly avoided a nearby accident. He also apparently narrowly avoided being hit by a truck jack. And the scariest part of all, his own semi-trailer flipping over during the procedure. All the tires on one side of his truck were full of air, and he was sure he had just flipped the truck over a damn mountain, all so these two assholes could play chicken. So here's the scariest thing my dad says he's ever seen while driving: a pair of flying Frenchies. I delivered and installed equipment. Since I was behind schedule, I decided to reach my next destination late. There were no street lights or other cars. At the peak of the feeling that I was in the middle of nowhere, every single light on the dashboard of the truck came on, and then it went out. Now it was pitch dark. I pulled over and the truck wouldn't start. I turned everything off and started making phone calls. I looked up and saw something moving in front of the truck, right within range of my hazard lights. I finally got through to someone, and they told me it would be 2-3 hours before they could get a mechanic for me. So now I sit in silence. The only sound is the clicking of the hazard lights, and I'm looking through the windshield into the darkness when I notice movement again. I turned on the high beams. The headlights illuminated 3 wolves snacking on what looked like a corpse on the road. I honked the horn, and they looked at me like they were more annoyed than scared. The wolves probably weren't going to bother me, but it was creepy just knowing they were there. So I turned off the light. Suddenly I heard what I can only equate to a woman's scream of horror, which seemed to come from right behind the truck. Then something slammed into the side of the truck, hard enough to rock it. I turned on all the lights and pressed the horn. I checked both mirrors, and the only thing I saw was a shadow darting across the road. I also noticed that the wolves were gone. From all the nature documentaries I've watched, predators only leave food when there are larger predators nearby. I heard him running around in the bushes nearby, breaking sticks and what looked like logs. I basically had my hands on the steering wheel, turned on all the lights, and frantically looked out the windows and mirrors to make sure there was nothing in the immediate vicinity of the truck. Finally, I saw the headlights in one of the rearview mirrors. The noise stopped as the headlights got closer. Obviously, it was a mechanic. He drove out in front of me. My headlights were shining on his truck. As his door opened to leave, we both heard the scream again, and the clattering of the bushes intensified. His door immediately closed, and my phone rang. He called me on my phone and asked what it was. There was more panic in his voice than mine. I had no idea what it was, and he had no idea what it was. So the mechanic called the police. 2 state police officers showed up. They lit up the place like a stadium. I finally got out of the truck for the first time since this all started. We heard this scream 3 more times while the mechanic was working on my truck. Fortunately, they moved further and further. The cops had no idea what it was either. They were also a little scared. The mechanic finally started my truck, and I made it to my hotel for the night. The side of the truck that was hit had a dent the size of a basketball about 7 feet off the ground. I have no idea what it was. I'll probably never know. I know for sure that I will never ever drive through the Upper Peninsula at night again. I worked for a company that owned a Caterpillar D9 bulldozer. It weighed over 100,000 pounds. They had to use a 1980s-era tractor and trailer to get him off the property. Both were functional and as safe as possible, but had seen better days. They asked me to deliver another company's bulldozer, and I agreed. We loaded the dozer, secured it to the trailer, and I was on my way. One of the intersections on this state highway is notoriously bad. It's at the bottom of the hill, and if you're coming from the side of the hill, you won't see any traffic lights or traffic until you get over the top of the hill. Usually, you still have enough room to stop. As I was approaching this intersection, my CB antenna came on, and some guy was literally yelling into it to slow down at the top of this hill. The problem was that my CB was not tuned and I was only catching every third word. I let off the gas pedal when I reached the top of the hill, mainly because I hated this intersection. I would have had enough time to stop, even under these road conditions, if the traffic was normal. Unfortunately, the movement was abnormal. There was a fresh, fairly serious accident at the intersection, and traffic was backed up more than halfway to the top of the hill. The accident occurred recently, so there were no emergency services at the scene. Now I had very little room to stop a very heavy truck with a very old load. I downshifted and braked, realized that I was going to close the distance very close, and began to brake harder. Then I realized that I was hitting large patches of ice on the road. The tires were slipping and the tractor was jerking from side to side. I heard the clunking of the fifth wheel and felt the trailer being pulled by the tractor in some strange way, so I looked in the driver's side mirror and saw nothing, including the bulldozer. In a panic, I turned my head to look in the rearview mirror, and the only thing I saw was the entire side profile of the trailer and bulldozer. I made a terrible mistake by letting the trailer back out on me. It was one of those, well, this is it. This is how I die moments. Now I was working with a jackknife, still moving and still trying to stop the truck on the icy hill. I was heading towards an intersection full of stopped cars, and my truck weighed a lot. By this point, I was completely convinced that I was going to unwittingly kill a bunch of people. I pressed the horn as hard as I could, but also tried to control the steering wheel, trying to pretend that I was in control of the situation. Honestly, I got to the point where I actually realized that I was just a passenger standing on the brake pedal. I didn't have enough room to fix anything, so I just pressed the horn as hard as I could. The trailer tires finally got hot enough to start making a very loud and deep squealing sound. In front of me there was a bunch of people who got out and ran away from their cars. Mostly they watched uncontrollable death cascade down the hill. Finally, the truck stopped 3 feet from the last car at the intersection. I could sit on the bumper of my truck and easily put my legs over the bumper of the car. The truck stopped with the trailer raised, so I blocked both lanes of traffic and the emergency lane. I was sweating and shaking with anxiety. As I sat in the stopped truck, people who had abandoned their cars were now shouting at me and pointing up the hill. I looked up the hill and saw another tractor, but with a tank trailer, basically enduring whatever I had just had, with much less room to work with due to my trailer blocking most of the road. I got out of my truck and ran away from him. The second truck pulled down, stopped, and parked almost right next to my truck. As soon as his truck stopped, I saw that he was experiencing the same thing as me. We both came very close to having serious accidents. Luckily, he had a dry tank. I'm pretty sure that's the only reason he was able to stop. He was running much easier than me. By this time, the CB guy had gotten through to enough truckers at the top of the hill that they had slowed down just about everyone. As soon as the adrenaline wore off, I almost lost consciousness. I have driven many different vehicles in my life, and this situation was without a doubt the scariest I have ever encountered. I had absolutely no control over the situation, and that's a bad feeling for the cameraman. I remember people running out of their cars comforting me. More than 20 years have passed since this happened, and I still get goosebumps when I think about it. If I hadn't been able to stop that truck, I would have plowed through all those cars without much resistance. Another 5 miles per hour, or changing lanes, some more ice, even time. My best friend freshman year was a truck driver. His worst story happened while he was heading to Georgia, a routine trip with diapers and baby wipes. He had spent a good long day traveling with a man who had a full tank of gas. The trip lasted a week, and my buddy and this gas station guy spent the last 6 hours on the road together, filming shit on the radio and whatnot. After almost a whole day of talking, my friend got a call from the gas station guy, and my friend said that these words made his blood run cold. "Hey buddy, my brakes are out." My friend turns on the radio and reports this to other truckers. They try to cordon off the passengers behind him while the police can move ahead of him to clear the road. My friend loses sight of the road because there is now a very large bomb flying along a popular freeway with no stopping power. They allow you to move on. The situation was resolved, and by the time my friend got to the emergency stop section of the freeway, he saw that the entire section was a 50-foot wide crater, metal and dirt everywhere. But there were no injuries or accidents, with the exception of the brave tank guy who rushed headfirst to his death to prevent others. My father was a truck driver for many years. He was driving down the mountain in icy conditions, but they salted the road well, so he was fine. However, as he came down the last section of the slope, there was a bridge, and bridges are notorious for becoming icy even when the rest of the road is dry. The moment he hit the bridge, his trailer began to spin out. He saw it approaching him in the rearview mirror. He said the rule is, if your trailer goes 45 feet, you're done. No hope of recovery. Hold on to your ass and hope for the best. Well, his trailer traveled 45 feet, and when he looked ahead, the road on the far side of the bridge was completely dry. In that moment, he knew he was dead, that as soon as he touched the dry pavement, all hell would break loose. He kept looking in the rearview mirror and watching his trailer stick out to the left and tried to find some way to save it, even though he knew he couldn't. But this dry place quickly became overgrown. Only somehow, when he hit the dry road, everything just instantly straightened out, as if there had been no problem at all. He pulled over to the side of the road and parked to cry his eyes out and thank every power in heaven and earth that he was still alive.